Oh yeah, you see that title. That rustles your jimmies, grab your popcorn, because you're about to hear some real shit. My entire life, from a very young age, free speech was promoted to me as some golden standard. An idea we must always hold ourselves to allow even people we disagree with completely to freely speak their opinions, no matter who it is or how bad you don't want to hear it. It's a God-given right, some people said. Others would tell me it's in the Bill of Rights, encoded in our 100% not fucked up at all Constitution. And thus it was the absolute truth. I mean, nobody's gonna argue with some guys from 200 years ago. We may not have had germ theory quite down pat yet, but that's okay. I'm sure they knew what was going on, right? Strangely, at the very same time, growing up as a small girl and a young woman, my speech was limited constantly, often by the very same people promoting free speech as an ideal. They'd tell me, women are better seen and not heard, so shut the fuck up, or just talk over me and interrupt me, until I'd give up and accept that I need to be silent. I was conflicted. I'd heard one thing was the law of the land, but my experience was completely different. So whose rights exactly is that law protecting, then? The answer I've come to after being on this earth for 31 long, confusing years is not mine, and probably not yours either, to be honest. I'll have to come around to my argument, if you can even call it that. This is more just me speaking my mind. Something I've finally gained the confidence to do after falling in love with someone who encourages me, rather than telling me my place is dressed up, standing in the corner in silence while I await a command. You see, free speech, I'll argue it's never really existed. And think about it. Back when the country started, not everyone knew how to read or write. Access to printing and distribution services were reserved for people who could afford it, the wealthy, upper middle class. There were whole swaths of people unable to consume any information other than what was disseminated by moneyed interests. And those moneyed interests, they were the only ones with truly free speech at the time. If some poor rube went and stood on the street corner to preach their views, they got taken with as much seriousness as we take those types now. Preachers standing on the side of the road, holding signs telling you you'll go to hell, or, you know, it's definitely going to be the apocalypse sometime soon. Nobody takes those people seriously. At least nobody I've ever met. Nowadays, access to information and literacy is still not perfect, but it is greatly improved. Access to free speeches, too. There are millions of places you can put your views out to others, like YouTube, Twitch, where you should definitely check me out, by the way. I stream almost every day. Twitter, and innumerable other blog and social media sites. Most of these places are relatively loose with the rules. YouTube, for example, only really cares about copyright infringement because they were taken to court. Also, they only started restricting content geared towards children because they were taken to court. Oh, offensive and disinformation content? Court for that, too. That one was pretty... Oh, wait a minute. If we have the right to free speech encoded in law, why would the courts who understand the law take actions to limit speech of any kind on a broad scale? Why would they interfere in the actions of a private company? Why would YouTube be able to get sued for that? If the content's posted by a real live USA citizen, shouldn't it just be free speech and that's that? Well, ignoring for a moment that private companies can set their own rules, no. For another reason. You see, in the case of copyright, it was those dastardly moneyed interests again that made it the way it is now. In the case of content for kids, it was technically the information collection of those kids that got YouTube in trouble. They were trying to build custom ad profiles, a thing Google just does by default for every living being on the planet. But what about the disinformation, the offensive content, and the countless other things they've been mostly forced to disallow? See, the government recently has been experiencing the consequences of mostly unfettered free speech. As it turns out, when you let anybody say anything to millions of people, some of those millions are going to believe it. And then they'll turn around and tell their friends, and some of their friends are going to believe it. So on and so on, the idea spreads. It's fine if it's just some cute recipe or life hack, but lately that information has taken a very dangerous turn. Whether it's people claiming diseases don't exist, or people claiming their magical cabbage and bleach solution is a cancer cure. People have begun to share blatantly false and easily disprovable information as if it's true. Let me say it plainly. People have died because of free speech. Not just because somebody was offended by something they had to say, or because they faced consequences for their own speech. People have been killed by lies promoted as truths. If someone is destitute, they get diagnosed with cancer, and all of their friends tell them that they saw on Facebook there's a $50 a gallon guaranteed cure available on Facebook Marketplace, they might opt for that instead of the treatment their doctor recommends. After all, it's their friends saying it, and they wouldn't mislead them, right? And when a new parent asks on their local parenting group for advice about their child with a fever, you'd hope the advice is reasonable. You'd hope that seeing a doctor would be included in that advice. But right now, it's perfectly legal for essential oil sellers to go recommend dumping garlic oil up your baby's nose to cure their ailments. That's perfectly legal, even though there's no fucking way that's going to help. And in fact, it's most likely going to do a lot of harm. And when people hear information from a source they trust, they tend to weigh it more heavily in their minds, and they're more likely to believe it outright, give it the benefit of the doubt at least. When multiple friends or peers share the same concept, you kind of start to warm up to it. You've heard it a few times, everyone's doing it, it can't be too wrong, can it? I mean, look at how many people believe in this stuff. Maybe these blue light reflecting gummy vitamins really will straighten my spine and uncross my eyes. You seeing the problem here? I hope so. I have to wonder, why is all of that allowed? The stuff that's actually harming people. Yet certain types of disinformation have been legally disallowed. It comes down to who it's hurting, ultimately. Copyrights, moneyed interests were hurt. They have the resources to legislate whatever the fuck they want, so if it wasn't already illegal, they took actions to make it so, or set the fine so high that most places would rather not chance going against the DMCA. Children's content, it's obvious, it was hurting kiddos. Everyone's always screaming think of the children, so that one was an easy battle to win. Now, in the case of what's classified as disinformation nowadays, and usually rightly so, it hurt the people in power. They faced an insurrection, a riot, or, depending on where you get your news, maybe you think it was just a purely peaceful Capitol tour, where they bought their travel guillotine just in case they needed to slice some human-sized bagels. It's obvious why the people in power would want to restrict that. The government wants people to sit the fuck down and stay the fuck in line, keep working your mind-numbing job, and keep making their numbers go up, or else they won't feel big and powerful. They need their ant farm, okay? Get back to work. Let me be frank. I disagree with the government on almost everything, but I agree with them restricting free speech. I think they're right to do it, at least in 2 of the cases I outlined above. Now, copyrights, fuck off. I think they should do it more, to be honest. I think they should establish a so-called free speech board that decides if stuff is harmful enough to be limited or not. Telling people to go fuck themselves because they don't like the same music as you should be allowed. Telling people to go off their psych meds and camp without supplies in Yellowstone National Park for 3 weeks to find their true self probably should not be allowed, to be honest. People have died doing that. I literally just got an article on my Google feed like 2 days ago about them finding a foot still in the shoe in Yellowstone National Park. People die out there. And that's where I think the line should be drawn. Right outside Yellowstone National Park. No, I'm just kidding. Are you telling this person to do something that could directly result in their death? That's where the line should be. You shouldn't have the right to say that everywhere on the internet to millions of people who don't know if you're being serious or if you're just trolling, because people are going to believe you, and people can get hurt. They may even die. To be honest, I think we need to abolish free speech as a concept, because it never truly existed here, and it never has existed here the entire time this country has been a thing. Even now, internet access still restricts significant portions of the population from freely speaking. Because in order to even get on the internet, you gotta pay or go to the library, which has limited availability in hours. If you believe Twitter is the public town square, then that public town square has an access fee. It's not free to the public, not by any means. Even if it were a literal public town square, if someone went into the middle of downtown, the last city I lived in large enough to have one, and started preaching their views, any business in that area can call the police and have them removed for being a nuisance. That's why the sidewalk preachers we see these days are restricted preaching at stretches of road and intersections more than 500 feet from any operational storefronts, unless they actually get permission from the person running the store. As usual, you can see that the speech is limited on behalf of the moneyed interest. Strange. Whenever you tell someone disinformation, whether it's medical in nature or falsehoods about current media events, both of those things are harmful if somebody believes them. If they don't take their proper medicine, don't see a doctor when they should, or if they end up getting swept up into some attempt to storm the Capitol, they could end up dead in each case. So why is one type of disinformation disallowed and the other type allowed? In this case, I'm referring to medical disinformation, which has always been exclusively allowed on many, many platforms. It all comes down to the fact that insignificant, moneyless peons like us don't have the resources to make it disallowed. That's it. What we can do is recognize that the concept of free speech has never existed for us, and we can stop buying the lie that our voices are protected by their scribbles on paper called laws. Even prior to the internet popping off, multiple types of speech have been restricted, once again, moves I agree with in this case, such as legislation against hate speech and bigotry. The problem is the law has not been updated, and bigotry has been. Bigotry has had multiple fucking patches and new versions to make it easier for people to get swept up into that bullshit. People are able to say their hate speech in codes now. Whether you look at the example of Reddit communities like our friend world, where the people say to bop all of the non-friends, and the only people who are in their community that they allow in their community are cis white gamers with usually Pepe Clown avatars. Only those people are friends. And nested in the comments, you see someone ask what bop means, and another user responds with a gun emoji. Please understand, that's literally a cutesy way of encoding their advocacy to kill everyone not like them. Reddit has tried to keep these communities banned, quarantined, and isolated. So it spreads elsewhere, because they want to spread it. They meaning the groups, not Reddit in this case. Now, Facebook, though it's been taken to court multiple times, used to be, and maybe still is, a hive of this kind of activity. During the tenure of our 45th president, illegal immigration was a popular talking point, a big boogeyman that everyone was scared of. And on Facebook, hate speech and murder advocacy thrived. I saw many people I knew succumb to sharing la funny memes, saying they wish Border Patrol would shoot non-whites on sight. By that, I mean, I'm sure you've seen it. If you're somebody that was in the US and on Facebook at the time, these memes would often say something like, my border control policy, and have a picture of some guns, or my border control policy, and just have a picture of some body bags. Things along those lines. It was gruesome. Okay? They weren't hiding it very much at all. Can you imagine how that fucking feels to see if you're someone who immigrated to this country, legally or otherwise? Now what's worse is it was discovered that Border Patrol themselves had secret Facebook groups where they were sharing these memes too, laughing about it, saying they wish that they could, fucking murder, and also making sexual assault threats towards certain female politicians that tried to take them to task. The years of encoded bigotry have empowered these hate-filled rage donuts, and now they want to use their free speech to just say it in plain words. And to be truthful, right now they have that ability. You can easily go on Facebook, Twitter, and even Twitch and find communities and people centered on hate. These days, it's mostly towards LGBTQ+ individuals, though it can happen to any minority group or any specific demographic. In an odd twist of fate, 1950s era propaganda talking points about how the mere existence of gay people is a threat to your precious children are returning to the public discourse. It's gotten so bad that anyone who dares to admit they're anything but straight can be fined and held legally accountable for existing and having the wrong job in the wrong state. They certainly can't speak freely. Why is it okay to limit their ability to speak about themselves? Why is it okay to limit their ability to share their lived experiences, their collective knowledge? Unless you're directly and specifically threatening someone by name, or trying to incite violent action against others, it's nearly impossible to get your content removed from any of those platforms, at least on the basis of it being hateful. Even if you get a few posts removed, suspension and an eventual ban requires consistent, repeated offenses. And once people get the idea that they're being watched, they get extra careful. They start using their established code words again, whatever that may be for their flavor of fury. Once again, as long as it's hidden under at least one layer of terminology that sounds cute, innocent, or clinical enough, you can say whatever you want without restriction. To cite this, I'd like to look at, well, I'm not going to pull it up, but I'd just like to recommend that you look at the recent, as of, August 2022, Jordan Peterson incident on Twitter. As long as the information that they're posting, as long as the posts they're making are clinical sounding enough, it's usually fine. It's only when it devolves into clear language and Jordan misgendered somebody multiple times that there was actual action taken. And what action was it? They just made him delete the tweet. That's it. That's it. I believe we need these companies, Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, maybe even the internet provider companies themselves, to take a stand. We should never have applauded the now abandoned attempt at purchasing Twitter by a free speech absolutist, a moneyed interest who knows no consequences for anything he's ever said because he was born into wealth and wanted for nothing his whole life. We should be advocating for hateful things, even in coded words, to be limited, because we know damn well the harm those statements can do. It only takes people hearing "bop all the non-friends" long enough for one of them to do more damage than you can even imagine the day they decide it's not a joke. Medical disinformation is even more volatile, since delaying trips to the doctor or emergency room on the advice of your local Facebook therapist can result in you dying if your issue needs urgent attention. We need to say no to hate speech, and we need to recognize that free speech does not exist. If it does, it's not free. It's for people with enough money to pay the admission price, and your speech holds more weight the more money you have. Because if you disagree with what someone else is saying or doing, and you have enough money, you can just take them to court and force them to shut up. The only actually free speech we have is what we say vocally to others, as long as we're not saying it in or near a place of business that doesn't want to hear it. And honestly, I'd argue we should stand against hate speech even in the realm of person-to-person communication. Now, I know some people might want to argue and say that me being able to post this proves that I have free speech. Yes, I have a working internet connection, and currently able to pay the fee, so as long as I don't break the rules, I can say this stuff relatively unhindered. As soon as I do break the rules, though, any of the privately owned websites I post content on could ban me, out me from their platform, and delete anything I have ever said as if I was never even here. As long as it's not copyright, I'd support them doing it if they were, applying this rule set. If I say or advocate for things that could cause the death or harm of others, actual harm, not like my fifis, my free speech, feels bad man, Pepe hands, I should be banned. If I spread disinformation or encourage people to harm others, I should lose my privilege to speak on these platforms. I would, and currently do, hold myself to that standard, and it's not even hard. So right now, I'm using my paid speech pass to spread the truth as I see it. Free speech never existed, and it flatly shouldn't. Speech advocating for harm, threats, harmful disinformation, bragging about or expressing wishes to violate others' bodily autonomy, even advocating for eradication of rights and privileges based on demographic group, should be disallowed and prosecutable by law, at least with a fine. We unfortunately cannot force people to be considerate of others, sympathetic to their causes, or understanding of their plights, but we can, and have, limited the types of speech that are free, and we should do it more. Every time the hate speech codebook updates, we should get an update, so we know what to look out for. We need to keep our communities, our families, and our friends free from hate, free from harm, and that kind of freedom requires we stop selling the lie of completely free speech to anyone who will listen. That's about all I have to say. If you have an issue with it, I'd love for you to tell me exactly what the issue that you have is, and exactly what you would like to say that you feel would be limited unfairly by my proposal. What hateful things do you feel need to be said? Is there a type of hate or disinformation or harmful rhetoric that you think is worthwhile? Do you support people being able to post questionable medical advice on Facebook? If so, why? As for who determines what is disallowed, I believe it should go by the simple metric I introduced. Does it cause, advocate for, or endorse violence and harm of other humans? Then it should be restricted. Is it misinformation that could contribute to or cause death? Then it should be restricted. Flat out. If you're the type of person who sends death threats to game developers or Kotaku writers, and you're worried this would affect you, it fucking should affect you. What's wrong with you? You shouldn't be doing that. Don't send death threats to people over the internet. Seriously, what's wrong with you? I waffled on recording and posting this for months, to be honest. However, the recent surge of popularity of certain politicians and even some content creators advocating for the complete eradication of my rights based on which demographic category I was born into has prompted me to post it. I know that may seem like an exaggeration to people who are not really keeping up with the current events, but I'm not exaggerating when I say, like, you know, the person was recently banned, so let's be fair with that. But I'm not exaggerating to say that people currently holding office right now are advocating the enforcements of Christian values, which is really strange considering that the whole fucking nation was founded on the principle of religious freedom and even freedom from religion completely. So I feel like I gotta speak out before, like, I'm not allowed to because I'm not godly enough. Anyone who wants to come and tell me stuff like, how about you shut up first then if you don't like it, you're welcome to come do so in my Twitch chat where I stream nearly every day for about 3 hours a day. I want to see if I can ban you before my mods do. It's a fun game. Hope you all have a great day. Hope to see you at the streams. Bye, everybody.